Nella mia vita sono stata stimolata da molte persone, ma soltanto da un tipo di automobile. Una volta Fangio mi disse che guidava a una velocità troppo alta.
The first 6 drivers will score half points, and Leila Lombardi makes history for scoring a half a point in the World Championship.
So I think it's something special for my whole family that this day has come and I'm driving a Formula One car.
But more history was made on the Tuesday after the race, with Sauber's test driver Tatiana Calderon becoming the first Latin American woman to drive an F1 car in an official capacity.
Jamie Chadwick wins the W Series Championship of 2021.
Indeed, there haven't been many, but they do get overlooked, women in Formula One, and that's what I'm going to look at today in this video. So, I am driving a Maserati 250F, as driven by Maria Teresa de Filippes back in 1958. She would be the first woman to drive in Formula One. She would qualify, or she would fail to qualify, unfortunately, for the Monaco Grand Prix in 58 and 59. She took part in the the Portuguese and Italian Grand Prix at the end of 58, but unfortunately would retire. However, her only sort of true successful race was the 1958... Got a Lotus hitting me up the backside. The 1958 Belgium Grand Prix. Running off the Armco. It's not even Armco, it's a stone wall. God, this track is... These cars and this track is treacherous. Obviously, this is the 1950s layout of Spa-Francorchamps, technically, because that's why it was called that. It started in the town of Spa and go to the town of Francorchamps. But this is what she raced at. She finished 10th, which in modern day would get you points. But unfortunately, this is back when it was 6th place. Yeah, I'm gonna let that Lotus go. I'd rather let the Lotus go than follow that other Maserati that went down there. Blimey, the Lancia's quick. Yeah, she would be the first pioneer. Ah, God! So that's why 1950s Formula One was brutal, and they don't race around this track anymore. I'm resetting the pit lane. I'm not going to win, but let's just drive around because a BRM decided to kill us. But that would have been death. As was experienced a lot around Formula 1. And yes, this is what Eau Rouge used to be. It used to come around this way rather than go straight up. It used to come around here. Which, if they could implement this in modern day, it would make this part of the track so much safer. But the iconic, but it's fun. Yeah. Maria Teresa de Filippes would finish 10th. It would have given her a point in modern day. She was here, so she owned, but she did race in 2 more Grand Prix, the Portuguese and the Italian Grand Prix, but unfortunately did not finish those. I'd like to finish the lap, but God, this is difficult. Maybe I shouldn't have done it with all the other drivers. I was amazed to see as well. Again, I'm not too well informed on drivers from like the 50s and such, but I was amazed to discover that she only passed away in 2016 in an Italian town called Lombardi, ironically. And I'll tell you why that's ironic. it was ironic because the next female Formula 1 driver would be in 1974 up until 1976 would be Leila Lombardi. She actually raced for quite a few years for the March team. And at this track, Monchith, I think, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It was a street circuit in Spain. This track, well, the drivers were not happy with the circuit conditions, and the Armco was not good, and no, the track wasn't up to scratch. And the drivers wanted to protest the race, but the race organizer was like, "No, you have to race it." And not long into the race, a driver, I can't remember who, crashed into the Armco and killed a bunch of spectators, and so the race was ended. Leila Lombardi was 6th at that point. However, the race was stopped before 75%, and even back in 1975, the 75% rule was in place, so half points were awarded. So Leila Lombardi was the first woman to score points, and it was half a point. And unfortunately as well, it does make her the only woman to have scored a point. Hey, I actually finished 6th. Ironic. So amazingly, it'd only be a year until there'd be another woman trying to get onto the Formula 1 grid, Divina Placita. She would attempt to qualify. In fact, Charlie Whiting tried to get her in the Ensign, which is what I am driving. Thanks, very nice of you. That's neutral. So she would try to qualify for the 1976 British Grand Prix here at Brands Hatch, and would sadly not qualify. She would then move to... Oh no, this is the Surtees. Apologies, this is the Surtees. Yes, it's the Surtees with the big Durex logo down the front of it. The following year, she'd actually also be put into a Hesketh. Yep, the same Hesketh that said sex the breakfast of champions. And she would fail to qualify for the Argentinian and Brazilian Grand Prix of 1977. Unfortunate for her. But she, very quickly after Leila Lombardi, so it obviously inspired a lot of people. But the interesting thing about Divina was she was one of 7 F1 drivers in history to also be Olympians. She was a very successful Olympic skier. And it wasn't until she was invited to a celebrity racing event that she found her skill in racing. And did almost get a seat in Formula 1. Just failed. Well, she did get a seat in Formula 1. She just failed to qualify, unfortunately. So still at Brands Hatch. And only again a few years later, 1980, you had Desiree Wilson competing in a Williams, in a pre-bought Williams. This was at the time where you could just buy old Formula 1 cars and compete. And she tried to qualify for the 1980 British Grand Prix in a Williams. Unfortunately, she did not qualify. However, there was the Aurora AFX Championship.
Aurora Borealis. No.
It was the British F1 Championship, which basically was an open championship. You could bring your own car and compete in it. Normally it was Formula 5000, but then in 1980 they opened up to Formula 1 cars. And so Desiree entered in this 1980s Williams that she tried to qualify for the British Grand Prix for. She failed to qualify for the British Grand Prix, but got into the British Formula 1 Championship, and she actually won that race. So she technically is the only one to have won anything in a Formula 1 car. She's also, unfortunately, the only woman, or the most recent woman, to have attempted to qualify for a Formula 1 weekend.
Hi, so voiceover editing Matt here. This bit of information is actually incorrect because I completely missed out talking about Giovanna Amati. And reading up on her, oh my god, she actually had a really interesting story, being friends with Elio De Angelis and working her way up through Formula 3000 and getting into Formula 1 and trying to qualify for the beginning of the 1992 season in the Brabham. However, she failed to qualify for the first 3 races, so was replaced by an up-and-coming British racing driver called Damon Hill. She also was kidnapped in 1978. Really, really amazing, fascinating story. Sorry, I completely missed her out in this story, and I wholeheartedly apologise for that.
That hasn't stopped women and Formula 1 from trying. God, this thing's loud. So, it would be a while until another woman would appear in Formula 1, and it would be at first practice at the United States Grand Prix in Indianapolis in 2002, where McLaren gave IndyCar driver Sarah Fisher a chance in a Formula 1 car, and she was in first practice in the McLaren around Indianapolis. Sarah would actually be a pretty decent IndyCar driver from what I've understood. She finished racing in 2010 and she got second place at the Grand Prix of Miami. Not the Formula 1 Miami Grand Prix, the Grand Prix of Miami in IndyCar. She got second place, which I think is the highest position of a woman in IndyCar, equal to Danica Patrick. Both having second place, but God, imagine being allowed to drive a 2002 McLaren. And British driver Katherine Legge would test for Minardi in 2005 here at Vallelunga. It was a private test for Minardi. Katherine Legge still racing at the moment. But a couple of years ago, Katherine broke her leg while testing for Le Mans, because she was going to go in with the Richard Mille team, which was going to be all women. It was going to be Katherine Legge, Sophia Flörsch and Tatiana Calderon, who I will come back to in this video. But that was going to be an all-women team. But yeah, she tested for lovable backmarkers called Minardi. That's sort of one of their home tracks here at Vallelunga. Minardi, of course, would then be bought by Red Bull. And the one caveat of their contract would be keep it in Italy. And Red Bull were like, okay, we already have a team called Red Bull. What's Italian for Red Bull? Toro Rosso? Okay, we'll call it Toro Rosso. So, predecessor to Toro Rosso. And predecessor to AlphaTauri. Now, Sarah Fisher and Katherine Legge would unfortunately just be one-off tests for those teams. It wouldn't be until 2012 that a team actually signed a female driver onto their team as a development driver. And 2 years later, 2014, at Silverstone, would be the first time that a woman would sit in a Formula 1 car since 1980, and that was Susie Wolff for Williams' team. She took part in first practice in 2014. And I think it was very, very well received. It was a British driver getting into a British team for a test, so obviously it was going to be well received. But also, it was good to see a woman back on track. Susie wouldn't stay with the team particularly long. I think it was a little bit later that she then broke away from the team. They would then be run by a woman. That sounds really condescending. I don't mean it like that. But Susie would step away, but actually would become successful in her own right. She's team principal of the Venturi Formula E team. They would actually sign Felipe Massa, who drove this car. And yeah, Susie would sign Felipe Massa to drive for Venturi for their first season. And she's of course a commentator and pundit for Channel 4 if you're in the UK and you watch Formula coverage on Channel 4. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I hate these 2014 cars. I hate these new turbo cars. Come on. New turbo cars. But then, with Susie getting signed for Williams, that somewhat opened up the floodgates for other drivers to be signed for them. Susie was the first one to actually take part in a practice session, but there were a handful of female drivers who were contracted to Formula 1 teams, although they wouldn't see any track action. So also in 2012, with the signing, the lovable backmarket team of Marussia would sign Maria del Valotta, daughter of a Spanish Formula 1 driver from yonder years, and they would sign her as their reserve driver. She showed a lot of promise until a testing session at Duxton, I think. Duxford Aerodrome in England in 2012. She would pull up behind the team truck that was there, and she pulled up behind it, and the car lurched forward. And particularly in England, you know when you see a truck and you've got that bar underneath the back of the truck, normally where like the indicator lights are to stop cars from going underneath it. Well, Formula 1 cars are a lot lower than real life cars, so her car jolted into that, and it caused her serious head injury. Not brain damage particularly, but she did lose the use of one of her eyes. She then became an advocate for blindness charities, but unfortunately in 2013 would finally succumb to her injuries and would very tragically pass away from her injuries sustained in a Formula 1 car. I mean, we think of the gap between Ayrton Senna and Jules Bianchi being the gap between deaths in a Formula 1 car. Jules Bianchi also ironically in a Marussia. But a lot of people forget about Maria del Valotta. And the reason I am driving this around the Valencia Street circuit is because I remember knowing that she was the reserve driver, and for the European Grand Prix of 2012, pretty sure it was 2012, one of the Marussia drivers became unwell, and I got really excited actually because I was like, their reserve driver is Maria del Valotta. She can get in the car. Turns out she wouldn't have the right number of driver points, FIA points on her license to be able to drive race a Formula 1 car. So sadly she couldn't compete, but she was that close to being able to competing and driving in the 2012 European Grand Prix, which actually was a really, really epic Grand Prix. And we could have had a woman in that race as well, which would have made it so much better. Well, in fairness, I don't know how much better it would have made it, but it would have made it more memorable, and it would have been something that, it would have made it a historic race. So in 2014, another driver would be signed to a team, and Sauber, the Swiss team Sauber, hired Swiss-Italian driver Simona De Silva? I can't remember, I just saw it, I just wrote it down. Silvo. They signed her as an affiliate driver with their aim of getting her on the grid in 2015. That never happened. However, she is still currently racing. She races for Porsche at the moment in the GT series. But she also raced in IndyCar and drove for Andretti in Formula E. Not long after getting signed for Sauber, she raced in 2014-2015 Formula E Championship. Oh, and I picked Monza because Swiss-Italian driver, so Italy because there's no Swiss Formula 1 track. So the next woman to be signed to an F1 team would be the following year in 2015 by Lotus. And this came with a lot of controversy. Camera Jordan. And if you want a full breakdown of this, I recommend going and watching Josh Revell's video on her. He goes into great detail about it. Basically, they signed Jordan to the sport, to the team, and straight away it was met by criticism by Michel Mouton, the absolute legend that dragged the Audi Quattro through the 1980s, right? She was an unbelievable driver. And she was like, why did you sign Karma Jorda to the Lotus team, whereas people like Danica Patrick, Susie Wolff, Vice Gavissa would be much better choices. And even journalists and critics were like, they are probably just hiring her as a marketing gimmick and for her looks. This was also backed up by the fact that Jordan herself said, you can't be a woman in this sport because it's all male dominated, and it's unfair for women because men are stronger and men can handle the Formula 1 cars, whereas women are naturally at a disadvantage. In which other women drivers, like Sophia Flörsch, came around and just went, what? What are you talking about? No. You are so wrong. So nearly every other woman racing driver in the world was just like, who is she? She's not very good. And also, this came from criticism from the GP3 championship, as it was at the time, Formula 3. She was signed to an F1 team as a reserve driver straight out of Formula 3. The only other driver to be signed would be Alex Lynn. Alex Lynn won that championship. Kamala Jordan came 29th. So she was a very controversial figure to suddenly have in the sport, because everyone was like everyone was like, she's not very good and she's a bit arrogant about it. Again, go and watch Josh Revell's video about it. He researched it more than I have. Needless to say, she didn't get an F1 seat. The final two on this list, I know it's sadly not a very long list, but the final two on this list, I really like these two drivers, and was gutted to see that they never actually got a shot in Formula 1. And this totally isn't because this driver that I'm going to talk about now didn't like my reply on Twitter when I wished her a happy birthday. That being Venezuelan Tatiana Calderon. Alright, she did sort of sink in Formula 2, but that's the highest we've seen a woman get in Formula racing. At least she got to Formula 2. and of course was teammates with Antoine Hubert. But Tatiana was signed to the Sauber team in 2017 and in 2018. Tested the Sauber F1 car. She got a drive in Mexico in the 2018 Sauber. So unfortunately, she could have been there. She just, unfortunately, I think, just sank in She just sank in Formula 2. Struggled to get off the back row, which was a real shame because she had a spot basically in the Sauber team, and if she'd gotten the driver points that she needed, she could have been given a seat. There's many people in that season that raced against her as well. There was like Mick Schumacher and I can't remember who else was in that particular. I can't remember who else was in that particular season. I think it was the season after Lando and George and Alex. It was after that, I think. But I know definitely she raced against Mick. Mick obviously did very well. So did Antoine. Yeah, Tatiana could have had a seat. However, it hasn't actually stopped her because she is now racing for. Well, she did a bit of enduro alongside Katherine Legge and Sophia Flörsch. In fact, Katherine Legge got replaced by Bajska for the Richard Mille team after her accident. But Tatiana is still racing and is currently doing the IndyCar series. She isn't doing the ovals, but she plans to do it next year. Sort of like how Romain Grosjean did it, sort of doing the circuit stuff first and then looking at doing the ovals. But if Tatiana does well in IndyCar, that's a ticket into Formula 1. That gets you enough driver points to be able to get into Formula 1. So we might still see her in the future. I really hope so. But I think a driver we're more likely to see come through the ranks, it is just money dependent, is our final driver. And that final driver, I think we will hopefully see in the future, is that of British driver and two-time W Series champion Jamie Chadwick. 2019 she got signed to the Williams F1 team and is still contracted with them. She's obviously two-time W Series champion and fighting for a third championship, and so far I think has won every race of the W Series calendar. And again, that's up against great drivers like Bajska, who I've mentioned before, and particularly strong fights this year and last year from Alice Powell, and we've got all sorts of great drivers in that series. Marta Garcia, Jess Hawkins, loads of them. Loads of them. If you're not watching W Series, I urge you to go watch W Series. Just as long as they don't cut away from W Series podiums to go talk to James Bloody Cord. But I really hope we see Jamie in a F1 car. And a lot of people are frustrated that she is doing her third season of W Series. And Jamie is also frustrated that she's doing her third season of W Series. Because she deserves a seat in Formula 2, in Formula 3. But it's a financial thing. It's a financial problem. I mean, that's the idea of W Series, that it gives her. She wins like $1 million, $500,000, to be able to help fund a career somewhere. But it's so expensive getting into these upper sports. And Jamie isn't coming from a overly privileged background, so. She doesn't have the funds herself to be able to go and do it. I amazingly recently discovered that when Jamie was young, she went and lived on the Isle of Man when she was a young child, meaning she would have been on the Isle of Man same time I was on the Isle of Man, because she's only a couple of years younger than me. And it suddenly made me think, going, did I ever cross paths with her? Child of a similar age on a small island like the Isle of Man. That also meant she grew up with a TT, which maybe is where her love of racing came from. I don't know. Also, further connection, her boyfriend is a racing driver from Guernsey, and I lived in Jersey for a while. Alright, it's not the same, but still, it's the Channel Island. Yeah, I think we'd see... I'd really hope that we do get to see, particularly in my lifetime, I hope we get to see a woman in Formula 1. We're done with pre-qualifying, so the issues that a lot of the ladies had back in the 80s, 70s and 50s about the pre-qualifying, we won't have to worry about that. There is still the 107% rule, but it's very rare that someone doesn't get in the 107% rule. But I'd love to see someone like Jamie or Tatiana getting into a Formula 1 car. I'd love to see it just for a practice session, because it's been 2014 was the last time. I would love to see a woman in a race in a Formula 1 race. I mean, even just for a practice session, again, it would be good, because 2014 was the last time that happened with Susie Wolff around Silverstone. Because the drive with Tatiana around Mexico was a private session, I believe. It wasn't during a practice session, an F1 practice session. But I'd love to see it. Who would you love to see as well? I mean, take your pick from the W Series grid. Am I right? I mean, loads of the girls there deserve seats. Marta Garcia, Jamie Chadwick, Alice Powell, Jess Hawkins. Any of them they deserve. Abby Pulling doing really well. Like they all deserve a great a seat up here somewhere. Or maybe we see someone from a different, not going through W Series. Maybe we see Tatiana Calderon coming back for another try, or Sophia Flörsch gets her way back up through Formula 3 and competes again in Formula Series. Who knows? I'd love to know who you think will be the next woman to drive in a Formula 1 car. But I hope we see one soon. But like I said, not just for seeing them in a practice session would be good. I'd love to see them in an actual race. Last time we had a woman actually race was 1975 or 76. I can't remember which one. Leila Lombardi race, but she was the last one. So I hope you found this somewhat entertaining. I hope I haven't offended anyone, or anyone took anything too offensive. I thought it was sincere enough. Need to be careful these days, you know. You could say something that someone doesn't like it. But hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully we look forward to the future of Formula 1. See you guys.